Well, we're live. Good morning. And Dr. Jan's words, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Depending on where you are in the world, one of those apply. And listen, everyone, we're just so thankful today to have you all with us as we go out with a bang. We're so excited about our speaker today because he is my God, wow, what do you say about a man who's pioneered um, this wonderful work that you want to improve your self talk? I was listening to Dr. Shad Helmstetter actually this morning, and I listen to him actually quite often because he has literally revolutionized this industry, and they call him the dean of the concept of self talk. And so I'm just excited to be able to just come live today to let you hear the wonderful message that this awesome man, his ministry, the ministry of his message, because he is truly, truly, truly a phenomenal person. I mean, he's been on Oprah Winfrey, NBC, CBS, ABC, CNN. My goodness, he's been on more radio and television programs than uh, I've I can count today anyway. He's does best-selling books. I have four of his books for sure, and each one of them are a delight. And when I was doing the weight loss earlier, not in this challenge, but a different challenge, and I would read portions of his book just to encourage us as we go through the day. And I tell you, people said, "What's the name of that book? How can I get one?" And people bought the book because the information is really just amazing. It's pivotal, and it is impacting, and it is life changing. So I just thank God for Mr. Shad Helmstetter, and I could keep on going on and on and on about how he is just really just changing lives through personal growth and self-talk. But I don't want you to hear me all the time. I want you to hear him. So for those of you all that are on our conference line, please mute your line so that we can hear Mr. Helmstetter as he comes forth to tell us about uh, well, however he wants to go. So Dr. Helmstetter, hello. How are you again?
Hello, how are you?
Wonderful. And you know what, Dr. Helmstetter, if it wasn't enough that your material is phenomenal, you have a voice that is melodious. So just listening to your voice soothes the soul. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew that as well. I don't know if you've heard that before, but if you haven't, you heard it here today. Have you heard that people said that your voice is relaxing, is captivating?
I'm just going to be real humble and say thank you.
And I love that humility as well. You are phenomenal. I'm thanking God for you today because you really are uh, a pioneer, and you're paving the way for people to come behind you, and many have come behind you and are really catapulted off of what you have been speaking and teaching for so many years. So let me ask you this. Is there something you want to say before I go into my question tirade for you?
No, no, I'm ready to go.
Okay, okay. Okay, so how did you become interested in self-talk and the idea of reprogramming the brain?
Well, I was, for some reason, I was always interested in why why some people were successful and other people weren't. And over the years, I got more and more interested in behavioral psychology and motivational psychology. I really wanted to know what was it? Were we just born that way, or was there something that was happening in our lives, or why do some people just tend to seem to do better? They may have the same difficulties as anyone else, but somehow they overcome the problems. They look at the world more optimistically. They find more alternatives, and they find solutions, and they set goals, and they work on them. And I wanted to know why that was. And I thought early on that it must have something to do with the way the brain was wired. So I was early in that study, because in those days we couldn't look into the brain and watch it work like we can today. We didn't have computer imaging technology like we do today. So I was just basing my early assumptions were based on my observation and studying both people who were successful and people who were failing in life. And the more I studied people, the more I thought, yes, this has to have something to do with the way the brain is wired. Well, by coincidence, perhaps, I don't know, maybe it was supposed to be that way, but I started out my first career as a language specialist, as a linguist. In fact, at one time I was a Spanish-English interpreter for the United States government in Cuba during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And because I had studied foreign language and I understood how we learn languages, I began to think, what if the people who are doing better have programmed their brains with a better language, with different words, with different messages? And I thought, that's a good way. That's a good area of research, and that's what got me started. That was about 40 years ago, and thank you to the field of neuroscience, we now have the answers.
Wow. Wow. And so when you talked about it, I didn't know you spoke a different language as well. When you start comparing languages, did you find that there was that because of the different words or emotions possibly attached to those languages, that there was a difference in how we talk to ourselves?
Yes, first off, I knew that. I knew how we learn a new language. We learn a new language, any new language. In fact, we learn our first language also through repetition. We learned our first language when we were very, very young, of course, and we learned it perfectly, or as perfectly as the people around us were speaking the language. We learned our first language without ever attending a day of school or having to study, because the brain was designed to wire in messages that were repeated frequently. And so what happened was we actually learned our first language by having it spoken in the background of our lives, day after day after day. And I thought, well, that being the case, and we understand how the words and phrases we begin to think in, how those get wired into our brain, I thought, what if you could change that language from a language of failure, a language of pessimism, a language of what you cannot do? What if we could change our thinking to a language of optimism and what we can do? And along the way, I discovered, and we now know this to be fact, that people who think in the positive actually wire their brains differently than people who think in the negative. And that's really important, because people who think in the positive actually grow more neural networks in the left prefrontal cortex of their brain, and that's the part of the brain that helps us seek solutions and find alternatives and take action and achieve the results. So that's very positive. Well, that part of the brain actually gets stronger, becomes more effective, it's enhanced by what we would call positive thinking. The opposite of that, people who think in the negative frequently, those people wire more neural networks into the right prefrontal cortex of their brains, and that's the part of the brain that causes you to shut down or stop or run and hide or flee instead of taking action and finding solutions and solving the problem. So we now know that the structure of the brain itself is changed by the words we use, by the way we think, and the way we speak. So I began to think, what if we could teach people a different way of thinking? It still might be it's still in English, but what if we could change the way they think. And that came about as a result of having studied language and understanding that, and then studying the differences between in the language of people who were very successful and the language of people who were having difficulties and failing constantly. And I found that there's a marked difference in how successful people think to themselves and what their self-talk is. And I thought, that's got to be the answer. They actually have given themselves a different vocabulary. And just like learning a new foreign language, we could learn that vocabulary. So that's where my work essentially started and has gone on from there for the last 4 decades.
Wow. So you kind of like, well, there are no accidents, but for lack of a better word right now, you kind of accidentally fell into this, though you were really headed in a different direction, which was linguistics, correct?
Yes, it's almost as though if I got to choose what I was going to do in this lifetime before I got here, that I probably chose to study language and foreign languages and understand that so that I could apply that. At least that's the way it worked out.
Wow. So that's something that we can all grab. We can all grab a nugget from. You know, you may be headed in one direction, and before you know it, or something happens that actually shifts the focus of where you are, and you head in a different direction. And it's so wonderful to hear that, Dr. Shad, because what happened with you literally is helping millions of people to even thrive instead of just survive in life. So I'm so thankful that you started one way, but literally the course that you ended up on was a course that was even better. I'm, you know, you may still love linguistics, but to just be able to revolutionize a person's life by helping them to shift their mindset or their self-talk, man, you're changing lives, you're changing households, you're changing the way the world is run. So if you ask me, this is just my opinion. You ask me, I think that, you know, where you ended up was actually greater than where you were headed. And I think that God does that with all of us. You know, we head in one direction and he ends up opening us up to even more, and it becomes a blessing to the people around us and ourselves too. So thank you for being open enough to shift when you needed to. Thank you, Dr. Shad. So,
Well, I had originally intended to go into the ministry.
mm,
That was I guess my first love, and it remained that way until just before I was to go to seminary to study. I told my parents that I had changed my mind and that I remembered what I told them. I said I wanted to reach more people than 145 communicant members in church on Sunday mornings. I said I told them I wanted to open the doors wider. So that must have been, at that point in my life, that must have been a turning point where I thought being in the ministry would be a very good future and I could reach people, but I felt that it was possible to do more than that. And so while I care a great deal about people who are in the ministry and helping others, I just decided, well, what about all the millions of people that I'll never talk to? And so maybe that had to do with, maybe that was just part of this process of then finally doing enough study in the field of motivational psychology and neuroscience that I wrote my first book, and then that book ended up opening the doors really wide, because that book ended up being published in over 74 countries around the world, and it's now it's in China in Chinese, and it's in Russia, and in many countries, and so I think that was probably the result of just wanting to open those doors wider.
wow. And then, so what you're doing though, Dr. Shad, is still ministry. You know, ministry happens in different ways. And so ministry is basically helping people to become their best self, of course, through the word of God. But even with the word of God, you still have got to have the proper mindset to even absorb that. So your ministry just broadened. And I think that God takes us on different paths for different reasons. And we needed what he put in, what he was preparing in you, because it literally does revolutionize the world. Now, the first book, is that what to say when you talk to yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and interestingly, when I wrote that book, I actually went away to, I think I mentioned this to you at one time, to an island off the coast of Texas to write that book. I wrote it in isolation so that I wouldn't get any negative input from friends who didn't believe in me. And I at no time did I ever think that book would just go nowhere, or although I didn't know anything about writing a book and I didn't know how to write a bestseller or anything, I just absolutely was convinced that if I spoke plainly and had the right message, that this book would go on and live a very long time. But sometimes I'm somewhat surprised that here, 40 years later, or 38 years later, that book is more popular today than it was even 10 years ago and 20 years ago and 30 years ago. So I think that has to do with the message. I think the fact that I had decided to put personal growth on the table with neuroscience. I think by bringing those together, I think it was the timing. And that's why people have been able to get a lot out of that book.
Wow. Personal growth with neuroscience. Wow. Phenomenal. So explain to us, what is self-talk and how does it work? Is that the same thing as affirmations as well?
Well, affirmations are similar, but they're also different. Affirmations tend to be more general, and I'm a believer in affirmations. I like them, but an affirmation like "I am at peace and one with the divine universe," for instance, while that may be a good affirmation, it doesn't get you to work on time. And I felt that we had to get much more specific than that the brain is actually looking for very precise, specific messages that give us a picture of who we are and how we interrelate with the world and how we act and how we feel about things. And so I began writing self-talk that it would be like if we had grown up with the very, very best programs being given to us. How would we think differently? What are the messages we might have missed along the way? What would those messages be if we could give them to our brain, that would get recorded in our brain and then through repetition get wired in? What would the messages be that would let us actually become the person we were born to be in the first place? And so self-talk, as we use it and we understand it now, is really that a vocabulary of written phrases that are recorded, and then people listen to them and listen to them repeatedly, because repetition rewires the brain. Our brains are being rewired all the time. They always will. And so whatever is getting put into the brain that is repeated most often, that's what the brain actually stores permanently. So self-talk is written to give new messages to the brain that let us see ourselves as we were intended to be in the first place, without all of the limitations, and with all of the opportunities and possibilities in front of us. And I should add that self-talk isn't like Pollyanna positive. Self-talk is really very practical. Good self-talk puts responsibility back on us. It tells us what we can do, what we can achieve, but it also makes us responsible for taking action and doing it and getting things done. So based on the notion that, and this is a fact, this is true, anyone who studies human behavior for long enough will always comes to an understanding that when we're born, we have virtually unlimited potential and opportunity in front of us, in spite of difficulties or family or things in our life or things in the world, things in our culture. Each individual is actually born to excel. No one was created to fail, ever. We're not created to fail. We're created to be the most successful individual we can possibly be. And that birthright never leaves us. That goes on through the rest of our lives. However, it gets covered over by negative programming and then negative self-talk, which tells us what we cannot do or what we can't achieve or why we're not good enough or smart enough or tall enough or rich enough or happy. So we allow negative self-talk without even thinking about it. All of those thoughts we think, all of those things we say without even being consciously aware of it until we stop to listen. All of those messages we get, our brain is actually listening to, and the part of the brain that stores all of those messages we get, all of those programs, that part of the brain doesn't know the difference between something that's true and something that's false. That part of the brain is simply designed to record, to wire in what it hears most often, and then act on those programs as though they're true. So the person who has been saying for years, I'm no good at this, or I'm not good with people, or my I'll never have a relationship that works. The brain is designed to act on that, and if you think it often enough, whether it's conscious or not, or state it often enough in your own self-talk, your brain will wire it in, it will record it, it will wire it in, and then that's who you become. So my message is, you don't have to live with your old programs. The brain is also designed to constantly rewire itself. That means it can rewire itself with new programs, and this time you get to get them right.
Wow. So I was reminded of an incident that occurred in my younger days, and it wasn't with me, but I heard about it. And there was a person that was locked into a refrigerated car, a train car, and they ended up freezing to death. And so the opinion comes out later. Then, first of all, the car never reached freezing temperatures, but the person froze to death. So you're saying that in for instance, possibly in that case, that because the person's self-talk was they were freezing, their body responded, their brain told their body, signaled to their body that this was happening, and they actually froze to death as a result of their self-talk. Is that kind of a possibility?
Well, that's probably an extreme, and without knowing all of the physics at play there, I really wouldn't know. But I will say this: it's become clear in the field of studies in the field of medicine, such as studies into the placebo effect. Yes, our bodies do many things that we would almost think are miraculous. They're not. They're physiological. Our bodies are able to do amazing things based on the input that we give it. So that's why when you take a placebo, maybe it's a pill that you think is going to fix something, you take the placebo, you think it's the real pill, and it fixes it. Well, the pill didn't do it. Obviously, your brain did that. So we know that's the case. But the kind of self-talk that I teach and I recommend people practice and use, kind that I write and record, that's really more about who you are as an individual.
Okay.
How you react to the world around you, what you think your strengths are, how strong you feel about overcoming your weaknesses, and the importance of setting goals so that you can have a target to aim at. And by the way, the original word of sin is an archery term. It comes from the word, it means to miss the target. I think that's fascinating. So self-talk as we use it today, positive self-talk we call it, is actually designed to literally give you a mental tune-up and to start getting you the right programs so that you think in the right language that helps you succeed, helps you move forward, and helps you really live up to the best of yourself.
Wow. Well, so can anyone change their self-talk, and does it matter? Does age is age important in that? Does it make a difference?
We used to think that the brain stopped changing when we were quite young. We've now learned, because of studies in neuroscience and being able to observe the brain while it's working, we've now learned that the brain never stops rewiring itself. So no matter what age you are, no matter young or old, or anything in between, your brain is still listening and it's still waiting for you to give it the right direction. So the answer to your question is virtually anyone can change their self-talk.
Wow.
Now, it's hard to change you can't change someone else's self-talk for them. You can help them change it if they're little kids, because they're still learning a great deal from you, perhaps as a teacher or a parent. But when we want someone to change, we have so many difficulties getting someone to change just because we want them to, and that's because they may not want to change themselves. They may not believe they can, and so they don't change. That simply means that their programs, their negative self-talk programs, are stronger than your positive self-talk programs, and that's perhaps the way it should be, because we're not really designed, we're not set up to program other people. Although I have to add, the world of media and advertising clearly is a world of programming other people. That's the basis of everything they do. That's why we like many of the things we like and don't like other things, and that's the way we vote, and so on. Yeah. Very often because of the repetition of media and things we hear on the news and in advertising. But if you're with someone who is negative and you'd like to help that person get more positive programs, it's really difficult to do anything other than encourage that person, except for if you let that individual know that the negative things they're feeling and thinking, talking about, are coming from programs that may be false. If you let them know that, and then show them how to change that, then many people who have had real problems with negativity actually decide, oh, wait a minute, maybe these programs are false. Maybe I can change them. And then they start practicing, and sure enough, they're as good as anyone else. They always were. They just didn't know it.
Wow. You mentioned earlier goals, setting goals. Why is it that it appears to be that, you set goals and you work hard for a season to accomplish those goals, but then all of a sudden, you just abandon the thought of even trying to accomplish the goal? How could you help people to with goal setting and how to accomplish your goals?
There actually is specific self-talk for setting and reaching goals, and a lot of that self-talk has to do with endurance and perseverance. That is, staying with it until you reach the goal. So let's say you set a goal, it's something you really want to achieve, and let's pick a real obvious one that everybody understands, and that's weight loss, losing weight. So you set a goal of a certain amount that you want to weigh. You know there are problems connected with losing weight because you've tried it in the past, and not everything works. Most diets don't work, and so on. So you set the goal, and you really work at the diet, and you weigh yourself frequently, and it's an important goal, and you really want to reach it, but you find out that after a while, your heart just isn't into it, and then you slip, and then the goal is gone. The goal didn't go away because of the diet. The goal went away because you didn't have programs that told you could achieve it. You had more programs telling you that you couldn't or wouldn't than you had programs telling you that you could. So if I were teaching that person the language of success in weight loss, I wouldn't just talk talk about food and diet. In fact, the self-talk that I've written about that has very little to do with food and diet. It has to do with things like self-esteem and believing in yourself and recognizing that you have the quality and the capability of achieving virtually anything practical that you want to achieve. And once you start believing in yourself again, then something like losing weight becomes a minor battle rather than a major battle.
Wow. And that's interesting because we have one of our team members, Dr. Shad. She said that the mind is her jam, but she lives in destiny. That's pretty cool. But she told us, she said, I was doing Dr. Shad's program on weight loss. She said, and I was going real good with it. And she's still doing it, but she said she noticed that as she was doing the program on weight loss, when an issue came up in an area of her life where she would normally back away and really not be confrontational or hold her ground, she says she noticed that she stood her ground, and she attributed that to the fact that, and actually what you just said, she attributed it to the fact that she was doing positive self-talk for weight loss. And it explains it now, because you don't necessarily address the weight loss as you do the mindset, building your esteem. And so she was strong enough to stand her ground because she did the weight loss self-talk. So do you find that
it's all about programming? Where the mind goes, the body follows.
yeah, that's good. So do you find that the reprogramming the negative self-talk, changing the negative self-talk, it not only improves you in one area, but it kind of expands the board in your life, to help you really begin to improve in other areas? Not just, you may be focused on, like we were just talking about, weight loss, but it also helps you out in boosting your self-esteem and recognizing your value and determining that you can be successful. So all those things are different components. If you just focused on weight loss, none of those things are included in weight loss as we think, and yet they are, right?
Yes, that's absolutely right. In fact, there are many people, who say, okay, let's say they want to work on one thing that's really important to them, so they might pick something like finances. There's a lot of good self-talk, positive self-talk written for improving your finances. And then people will say, so I started listening to self-talk for financial success, and I found that I was working out more. Or they might say, I suddenly realized that I was getting to work on time. I was getting more organized. Or they might say, I found that my relationship started improving. So how would that be? It's because in the brain, there aren't little compartments. All of our programs have conversations with all of our other programs, and so they work together. So when you begin to get better in one area, you'll naturally start to find positive differences in other areas. That's one of the real benefits that I think probably kept me working with self-talk very, very early on, many years ago, was that I thought at first that we would just help people fix one thing in their life, or some small thing. And we found out that people who start to use self-talk regularly and practice it starts to get wired into their brain. That affects everything in their life.
Wow. Wow. Wow, 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 wow. Well, you've been writing and recording self-talk for 40 years. Tell me about that.
Well, I started out writing self-talk. I wanted to test this idea that if you changed your programs, the wiring in your brain, you could change the results. And I wanted to see if it would really work, and I decided I would try it with the most difficult thing I could think of, and that in my life at that time, this was many years ago, also happened to be weight. And I knew I had tried every kind of diet there was, and none of them worked. Um, I still hate grapefruit juice. I was trying every possible diet, and what would happen is I would take the weight off because I was a goal setter. I was determined. I would take the weight off, but then of course the weight would come back and it would bring its friends, and so I'd gain more and more, and so I would go up and down and up and down. That the yo-yo effect. And I thought, okay, if I've had a difficult problem with weight for a long time, then that would be a perfect test for positive self-talk. So I began to listen to self-talk that I wrote for that purpose. And once again, that didn't just have to do with weight. That had to do with things like self-esteem and believing in myself and being able to accomplish the goals that I wanted to accomplish and so on. And what happened was, by listening to self-talk every morning while I was shaving, I just let it play in the background. And I'd play the self-talk, and then I would shave and get ready for the day. And what happened was I lost, in the next 10 and a half weeks, I lost 58 pounds shaving. And I thought, oh my gosh, this really works. And then I think what really impressed me was that my wife at that time, who was in the morning putting her makeup on at the other end of the same mirror, while I was listening to my self-talk, she lost 25 pounds eavesdropping on my self-talk. And then I realized, oh, this is programming. The brain is picking it up and it's working. I think that's what really convinced me to move forward.
Wow, she was eavesdropping, and it affected her too. So then, in light of that, that's pretty funny. But in light of that, this morning I was listening to your self talk on organization. I was listening to that this morning, and I fell off to sleep. So my question for you is: even when you're asleep, if you're playing this your self talk plus, is it still working? You think?
So you're talking about listening to self-talk while you're sleeping?
Yes. Any studies on that and the possibility of that maybe still working?
There's a benefit to doing that.
Okay.
It doesn't appear that it's as strong as listening while you're awake.
Okay.
However, we've learned over the years that it works best to listen to self-talk while you're doing something else.
Wow.
Like while you're not focusing on it. Just let it play in the background while you go about your day. That's the best way to listen. So that doesn't take any extra time. That's a benefit. But the brain actually absorbs it better while you're just hearing it in the background, which is exactly, if you think about it, how we learned our first language when we were little kids. It was being played in the background. But when you focus on it, when you try to pay too close attention to the self-talk that you're listening to, that just gets your brain to try to argue with it and say, oh no, that's not me, I'm not that good, or that couldn't be true of me. And when you play it in the background, that argument goes away, and the brain just absorbs it. It just takes it in. And as I've mentioned, but it's worth mentioning it very strongly, the key to all success is repetition. The key to all success in life in general is repetition. We learn to sports is based on repetition. Athletics, learning a musical instrument is based on repetition. Learning skills that's all based on repetition. Well, that's all because the brain is designed to wire in permanently those messages we get, those things that we do repeatedly. That's how the brain knows this is important. I better record this permanently. Wow. When it hears it again and again and again. So the key to listening to self-talk is also repetition. And the repetition is more important than the focus.
Wow. You answered the question before I asked it, because that's exactly what I was going to ask next. If you were doing something else, is it effective to listen to self-talk plus or self-talk words, and so you
Yeah,
answered it
in fact,
already.
a great time to listen
Mhm. Mhm.
when you're walking or
Really?
exercising or working out. That's a great time to listen.
Okay.
If you're doing something else, let self-talk play in the background, and you'll be getting better physically and mentally at the same time.
Wow. Wow. Okay. That's pretty cool.
It also
Wow.
makes your workout sessions more enjoyable and more fun. They go faster.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm going to have to do that one. So, is it true then that people become programmed either to fail or to succeed or fail?
Yes.
Hmm.
When I meet someone, or when I'm introduced to someone, or I'm asked to help someone, and let's say it's someone that has a lot of problems and they've been failing, they've been struggling, and it's not working. Life isn't working for them. When I meet them, I never ever think this person is a failure. I never ever think this is a bad person or this person isn't as good as somebody else. The thought doesn't even cross my mind. That individual, no matter who it is, the moment they were born with absolute unlimited potential in front of them. And that potential never goes away. So when I meet somebody, no matter what problems they're going through, I know that they're still that individual who was born to succeed. And in every single case, when you look at someone who is struggling, and that means there are millions of people in the world. Most people struggle at one time or another. Many people struggle a lot. There's always a direct link between the programs they have and the struggles they're enduring, or either what's happening to them or how they're dealing with the problem. That's always directly connected to their programs. So it makes total sense if that person learns to change their self-programming, their self-talk, and begin to wire the part of their brain that helps them find alternatives and seek solutions and take action and achieve positive results, that person is going to do better. So, yeah, so I wouldn't say that I'm just trying to solve all the world's problems with one thing,
Mm-hmm.
but this one thing, your programming, is at the root of everything else about you.
Uh-huh. Okay. All right. So, what are the steps to changing your self-talk then? How do I change it?
Well, the steps to change it are actually simple. I like that because that means anyone can do them, and most people are willing to try it. The first step is to monitor, and by monitor I mean listen. Make a deal with yourself to listen to everything you say to yourself, your own self-talk, for the next 30 days. And we're not used to doing that. We're actually used to ignoring most of what we think, or with things that we say. We just say them without really thinking about it. But make a deal with yourself. Set a goal to monitor your self-talk for the next 30 days. And that makes a lot of sense, because if you had someone go around with you and write down or record everything you said for 30 days, they couldn't record what you thought, but at least they could record the self-talk that you said out loud. If they wrote that down and they printed it out, and then at the end of 30 days, you took a yellow highlighter and you circled everything that you said repeatedly, that was repeated most often, you would have a perfect picture of what your self-talk is today. So that would give you a really good idea of what things do I want to change? What do I want to work on most? You can do that by monitoring, and monitoring itself is a habit. Listening to yourself is a habit most of us don't have, but it's an easy habit to adopt. Write some notes to yourself, perhaps, so that every morning you let yourself know at the beginning of the day that today is the day I'm going to hear what I say. And then, throughout that 30 days, you'll be able to start doing the second step, and that is edit. Every single individual has the ability to change what they're about to think or what they're about to say. And when you're about to say something that is negative or harmful or works against you, stop it, turn it around, and say the opposite. Now, that might sound at first like you're lying to yourself. Let's say that you've been saying for years, I can't remember names. I have a terrible memory. I can never remember people's names. So that's what you've been saying to yourself for many, many years. And then you meet somebody and you want to remember that person's name. 10 seconds later, you've forgotten their name and you're going through the alphabet trying to remember what their name is. And your brain is saying, you've been telling me for the last 30 years that you can't remember names. I'm just doing what you told me to do. So the next time you want to remember somebody's name, instead of saying, oh, I have the world's worst memory, turn it around and say, you know what? I've got a great memory. I've got a good memory. I'm good at remembering names. I like people. I'm interested in them. I pay attention to them, and I remember their names. I've got a great memory. Now, when you first start saying that, you'll think, I'm lying to yourself. But no, you're not lying to yourself. You've been lying to yourself for the last decade, most of your life. You're setting the record straight. You're turning it around. You're changing it. And if you were to do just that one thing, I'm great at remembering names. I'm good at people's names. You start changing that to the right kind of self-talk that tells you what you can do instead of what you can't do. What you find is a couple of weeks later, suddenly, that name comes right back to you, and it's there, and you were never able to do that before. That's because your brain is now just starting to wire those new messages in. The new program is being repeated often enough that the brain actually begins to wire it in permanently. Well, if you can do that with something as simple or difficult as remembering names, imagine what that same process will have to do with it when it comes to how financially successful you are, or how good you are at relationships, or what your self-esteem really can be and what it is, what it should be, living up to that potential you were born with. Imagine how you talked about being organized. Imagine what can happen when your brain finally gets the messages that tells you, you know, I'm a really organized person. I like to put things in their place. I'm organized and in control of my life. You start to get more organized. Your brain is doing it for you. And so just imagine the many areas of your life that will react to the same kind of positive programming just by changing some of your self-talk.
Wow. So you seem to be inside my head. I find you very fascinating. I find the work that you're doing is exhilarating as well. My question was going to be, and you kind of already tapped into it already. I was going to say, so you're telling me that my financial portfolio can I can increase my financial portfolio by what I'm speaking to myself. I can become more organized by what I'm saying, my self talk. I can really accomplish my goals by the self talk that I have going on in my head. I can actually lose weight based on the self talk and have better relationships based on the self talk. And I'm just going over some of, I know the programs that you have in Self Talk Plus that I find really, really fascinating. And that's what you're saying as well, is that I can actually upscale my life based on how I talk to myself.
Yes, that's true. And I know when you say that, it might sound, some people might think, well, come on, Shad, you got to be just overstating this, or it can't be that good. Well, all you have to do is find someone who is failing and struggling, and their life is just filled with difficulties, and they never seem to come out on top. And listen to that person talk. Listen to their self-talk. Then find somebody else, a friend or someone you know, who's doing really well, and their life is working, and they're on top, in tune, in touch, and going for it, and you can tell it. It's evident in everything in their life. And listen to that person. Listen to their self-talk. And the two individuals, one failing so badly, and one succeeding so well, their self-talk is the opposite an indication that there's something here to look at.
Wow.
And then when you add to that, that everything we're talking about today is based on really good research in the field of neuroscience, that it's just based on how the brain works. And because we know that, and because we can see we can hear with our own ears the difference between the self-talk of someone who's doing poorly and the self-talk of someone who's doing really well, since we can hear that, then it begins to make sense that, oh, yep, this isn't just some pie-in-the-sky hopeful motivational idea or something. This is a newer, updated understanding of how the brain really works and what we can do with it once we know that.
Wow. Have you explored or intend to explore the area of grief? I know that, there are steps that you go through in according to the Kubler-Ross model of grief
Yeah.
and walking through that. But is it possible, or have you explored the potential that though you go through those steps, you may be able to go through it a little bit better based on your self-talk?
Absolutely.
Wow.
And I don't want to, we could talk about that subject in great length, but I will say that the difference between grief that makes life almost impossible to endure and grief that ends up being healthy and good is you can tell which it is by asking yourself the question, am I in control of my grief? Or is my grief in control of me?
Wow.
And what that would reveal, studying that question, what that reveals is, do I have programs that are strong and optimistic and that allow me to look forward in spite of the grief? Or do I have programs of defeat and loss that I can never overcome?
Wow.
The person who has the stronger programs in the positive will still go through the grief. Now, it will have its pain and it will have its benefits. And that person will come out on the other side much better and having learned from life.
Wow. Wow. I tell you, you blow my mind with the things that you say, Dr. Shad. I just love it. And I'd like to just add one thing and then one more question, and we're going to let you go. And thank you so much for being here. But would you, oh God, I lost a question. Oh my goodness, I hate that. I should have wrote it down. Um, hmm. I'm trying. Oh, no, that wasn't a question. That was a statement. I was going to say that actually what you're teaching goes in alignment with the Word of God. And He tells us, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So if you, and one of my coaches, my mentor, he says, whether you think you can or can't, you're right. And that self-talk is reflected by whether you think you can or cannot. So yeah, that's what you said. If I think of the question, I'll ask it. But if I don't get to it, here's my last question. What words of wisdom would you like to share that will help our audience?
You still have it. You still have it. I may not know you personally. We may never have met. But if we ever did, I bet it would take me less than a minute just seeing you to know, just to hear a few words from you, to know that, yep, you're still there. You're still that person you were born to be, or you can be. It's all there. I may help you let it come to life or bring it to life, but it's still within you. The thing is, this is so important to remember. We never, ever lose the potential. We think we do because life is difficult sometimes. We don't lose that potential. It's just covered over by programs that doesn't allow us to see the potential. Change the program, your potential comes back, it's alive and it's well and it's waiting for you.
Wow. Wow. Because we were never meant to fail. Here was the question. I thought of it. If you're practicing positive self talk and you have someone in your ear that's consistently negative or speaking against what you're telling yourself, how do you suggest you overcome that?
You're talking about half the population. People who have negative people around them, and we all do. Um, yeah, the answer to that question is the strongest programs always win.
Wow.
So if your programs, if your self-talk is the right kind, if it's strong and positive and optimistic, and you take ownership of it, if your programs are strong, then the negative person who's nearby or talking to you, their programs aren't going to be able to override yours. That's the key. Make sure that your programs are always stronger. And we can do everything, we can work and do everything we can to help the people around us. But there are many people who maybe people at work or people that we don't have any direct contact with other than we their negatives could rub off on us. And don't worry about them. It's not that we're not compassionate. We are. But if you can't change their programs, make sure that your programs are positive, healthy, and very, very strong. And yours will win out. Yours will take care of you. That's what they're designed to do in the first place.
Wow. Well, I'm going to take my cue from you and your wife as you listen to it. She heard it and it affected her too. It impacted her life as well. So I'm going to take your cue. I'm going to take my cue from that, Dr. Shad Helmstetter, and I'm going to just play positive self-talk in different areas and just let it flow through the house so that if there's any negativity, that it'll automatically rub off on them while it's working on me too. So thank you so much. I think we can get in touch with you by doing shadhelmstetter.com. And I love your Self Talk Plus. Is that accessible by way of shadhelmstetter.com, or is there
Yes, so the best way to do that is to just go to Self Talk Plus, SELFTALKPLUS, selftalkplus.com, and you can subscribe to the Self Talk service that's presented by the Self Talk Institute, and that's where all of the self-talk, the recorded self-talk programs can be found. And I absolutely have to add, because I think it's such a great idea, you can listen free for 30 days. And that's enough time to get a feel for it. That may not change your entire life, but that's 30 days of listening to self-talk will certainly let you know whether it's going to work for you or not.
I'd like to say you're only doing this because they're on our program, but that wouldn't be the truth. But I still am thankful that you're doing that. When they listen, should they choose one course for 30 days or should they go in and out of different courses?
You can listen up to 3 different programs at a time, but I would focus on the thing that's most important. Let's say it's self-esteem. So you go to selftalkplus.com and you scroll down, and there you find the program called Positive Self-Talk for Self-Esteem. And just plan on listening to that as your number 1 program for 3 to 4 weeks. And then you can have a second program, and you can listen to as many as you want, but it works best to limit that to about 3 focus areas at a time. In other words, don't try to change everything at once. Just do it step by step. Start with 1 and then maybe a couple of secondary programs that you also want to work on.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Shad. I look forward to us continuing to do some work together. I look forward to the times that we can literally hold conferences and help people to really understand the value of who they are. And as you said, that we were all born to win, and but just some of us have accepted defeat. And the way we change that is by how we're engaging in our own self-talk. So thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm gonna hopefully hear from you again before we finish this 15-day challenge. But if not, we are thankful and we're going to definitely replay this because people need to hear this. You said it. Half of the world is affected by so much negativity that you seem to not be able to lift your head up above the water. And we definitely want to be able to make an impact on that and let people know that you can be successful, you can survive, and you can actually not just survive but thrive. So thank you so much, Dr. Helmstetter. Any last words?
No, other than thank you. I've enjoyed the time with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Likewise. Well, God bless you, sir. And I'm so glad that you decided to follow the course that was set before you. And I'm so glad you had that time alone because it is actually blessing all of us. So thank you so much. And I'm not going to hold you any longer. Have a wonderful day. And tell Tracy I said thank her. She's a blessing. Okay. Thanks.
I will, and she is, and have an incredible day.
Thank you. You do the same. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Wow. Wow, 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 wow. You know, you just couldn't give him 30 minutes. He really needed more. And I could listen to him for hours, actually. I don't know about you, but I hope you listen with your heart and your head. And I hope that my hope for you is that you really will take advantage of those 30 days of free self-talk. And you heard him. It was a good question, I think. I think all the questions were good, but when you engage in the self talk program, don't try to do it all. Don't try to do everything. Choose one program to really focus on. But he said you can literally listen to up to three. And just to recap, he said while you're listening, listen while you're doing something else. Because if you stop and focus on listening to it, your brain will try to tell you, you know, you're listening to self talk that says, one of the things that he says in the weight loss is what you put in your lips will show on your hip. What I put in my lips shows on my hip. And that's just one thing that just comes to mind that he said. And you know what I'll say to myself if I'm sitting there listening to that? That doesn't even make sense. It can't get on my hips that fast. So your brain will start showing or arguing with you with what you're listening to. So he says, do something while you're listening. Don't focus on listening to it alone. Do something else while you're listening so that it can kind of just, I guess I'm going to say this. He didn't say this. This is me. It could kind of seep in and be more effective in its landing in the right space in your brain. So you've heard it. I don't know how to ask you again. Please share this live. People need to hear this. Not only share this live, but please go to selftalkplus.com and download. You don't have to pay anything. He's telling you that's, you know, when you find somebody gifting you with something to help you through life, don't run away from it. Go towards it. And for 30 days, you can listen to this for free before there's any charge for 30 days. And he's saying, give me 30 days to try it. And if it doesn't work, you haven't lost anything because you haven't paid anything other than time. But if it does work, then give them a chance to help you go out with a bang and reframe your life, not just your day, your life. So thank you all so much for joining us. And I just love Dr. Shad Helmstead. I really do. And I could never get enough of him. I pray that you all will literally go out with a bang. And this is one of our personal growth sessions. And Out with a Bang is just designed to help you to reframe your life on all the different components of your life cycle. And you heard him. You heard him say it. And he's been studying this for more years than my children have been alive. You heard him say, and I heard another person say that Dr. Marlena, I'll tell you who it was actually, that when she was listening to self talk for weight loss, it impacted her esteem, and she was able to stand up in a situation where she would have otherwise backed down from. But because she was listening to self talk, it changed the way she operated in another area of her life. And you heard Dr. Shad say when the question was asked, are you saying that positive self-talk and programming yourself with positive self-talk can actually change not only the area of your focus, but other areas too? And he said, that's absolutely right. So, whatever you're dealing with, we want to help you to become better at being the best you that you could be. Why? Because, as Dr. Shad said it, you were never programmed to fail. Yeah, you might have been programmed because of conversations that you're having with yourself, other people, but you were born. That's the word. You were born to win. You never born to lose. You were born to win. So come on, people, let's win. And start by going to selftalkplus.com and downloading that Self Talk Plus program for 30 days to just try it out. And I pray that you got something phenomenal out of this. I know I did. And I'm going to I'm going to go and do something and listen to some more Self Talk Plus. God bless you. We'll be back at 6 p.m. where you will have my wonderful, I don't know what to call it, because she say mama. She calls me her daughter. And then she calls me her pastor. And then she calls me her friend. And she also calls me, uh, she'd say, oh, you're just so uppity sometimes too. And you know what? On all fronts, she was right. So I can't argue with truth. But here we go. At 6 p.m. tonight, Pastor Alice O'Neill will be coming back to talk to you about uh, how to spiritually upscale your life. Spiritual empowerment. Thank you so much, and keep tuning in and keep sharing. And we will have a winner from yesterday for today before we end at or after the 6 o'clock hour. We will have a winner. So thank you all so much. May God's riches and best be yours. Go back and listen to this again. These sessions have been awesome. Have a great day. Bye bye.